The New Orleans Saints were out on the field today for their first day of OTAs, and Derek Carr lived up to every bit the leader we wanted him to be. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can keep the conversation going one-on-one with me over at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site, covering the New Orleans Saints every Tuesday over on the Locked On NFL podcast. And of course, you can find me here every single Monday through Friday and then some on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we are live. Sorry, I was hyped. That was just for the YouTube audience. I was fist pumping, doing my whole thing. But we are live out here with the Locked On Saints audience. Appreciate y'all very much for being here, whether you're catching us live or you're catching us later. Today, we're going to go through a couple of different things focused entirely on everything you need to know from OTAs. We'll start with the biggest notes, including Chris Olave as well as A.T. Perry, both making plays already in OTAs. Impressive attendance for the New Orleans Saints. A really good step forward for guys like Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints as a whole. And of course, we're also going to lead off today's show discussing Derek Carr, because he turned out to be every single bit the leader that we expected he was going to be. Really, really cool stuff from Derek Carr all throughout the day today. You could see him very easily getting everybody in and out of the huddle. When he spoke, everyone listened. He was every bit the leader that we were hoping that he would be, every bit the leader that all the Las Vegas Raiders fans, or former Las Vegas Raiders fans, now New Orleans Saints fans, have been saying he was going to be, all of that. So lots of really impressive stuff from Derek Carr. And I'm talking, when I say impressive, I mean from on the field all the way through his interview, his sort of post-practice interview. So we're going to get to all that. I'll start off with some of the raw things that you should know about Derek Carr today. He was 8 of 8 when it came to passing. He was absolutely perfect. The other thing that he did throughout the day today was that you saw him move through progressions, take the check down every now and then, but not afraid to push it up the field. He had one nice completion down the right seam to Juwan Johnson. Great to see the seam back into play for the New Orleans Saints. We saw a lot of different things from him, both in 7-on-7s as well as in team drills, all of that. So he was exactly what it was that he was billed to be. Again, everybody paid close attention. Everybody kind of knew who he was going to be, all that. But then when you got to the post-game, or not post-game, but when you got to the post-practice presser, there were a couple of other things that he kind of said in there that made you kind of pique your interest if you know what he's saying. And one of the things that stood out to me was he mentioned that since he graduated from Florida State and since he's been an NFL quarterback, he has given his phone number to every Florida State quarterback that has played, and that Jake Haener has been the guy that most persistently utilized that gift, right? Of, hey, I've got Derek Carr's phone number. Let me call him up and ask him questions. But hearing that and hearing him kind of speak a little bit about how he, continues that sort of pipeline of Fresno State quarterbacks to him and garnering that sort of connection with those players, as well as, of course, serving as mentors to those players. Those are players that he may never play with throughout the rest of his career, Jake Haener excluded. So imagine what he must be like in terms of the accessibility and the reachability and all the things that he's willing to do with the teammates he actually shares the locker room with. So that was one thing. The other thing that I thought that stood out to me big time. Oh, look at all the Fresno people. Hold on. I see all the Fresno folks popping up in the chat right now. I love it. Yes, Fresno State. Or maybe I didn't say Fresno State. Maybe that's what it was. I might have said, oh, did I say Florida? My bad. Fresno State. So I got all excited. I thought all these people were like popping up from Fresno, all excited that I said Fresno. I felt like I was at a concert or something and somebody said the city name and everybody went crazy. I think the other thing too that really stood out to me was that he mentioned that he was studying the New Orleans Saints offense, and he would watch when Drew Brees was the quarterback. He would watch what receivers did in and out of their breaks, the top of their routes, all of those things. And that he would take clips of that and send it to people that he was working with and say, hey, do this next time, please. Do this when you run this route. Hey, do that when you run this route. And that's a really cool kind of concept, right? This idea that he's going back and he's looking at some of these successful sort of Drew Brees seasons. And then he's getting with the receivers and saying, yeah, do it like this. Yeah, do it like that. Do it like this. Do it like that. And showing examples of that, like real leadership in terms of being able to show, like, here's what I would love to see you do. And here's what I'm going to be looking for you as a receiver when you're running these routes. Point number 3, and this is almost as innocuous a story as you can imagine. But it is one that I think is really important. He mentioned that his daughter runs around the house and says his snap counts and does his pitch cadence and all these other things. And that the reason that happens is because he's going through the house and he's making play calls. He's doing his snap counts. He's doing all of those things, making his checks and stuff like that as he's kind of just walking through the house. Derek Carr is always on, is what I took away from that. And the fact that he's like at home and putting in all of that work to make sure that he's ready to show up for OTAs, that's pretty remarkable. That's really, really cool. And so it really just goes to show you that Derek Carr is every bit the leader that he was billed to be as a leader on the field, but that he is also very clearly every bit the leader that you would hope for him to be as a lead by example type of guy. There's just no denying it at this point that the Saints are in a better position at quarterback now than they have been over the course of the past few years since Drew Brees left. And I think some would argue that the 2 seasons at the end of Drew Brees' career when they were dealing with injury, or when he was dealing with injuries, so you had other quarterbacks coming in, that technically you're in a better position, except for the fact that then you had Drew Brees for at least like 12 of those games. But beyond Drew Brees, this is the best, sort of most translatable quarterback in terms of success that I think that the Saints have had on their roster over the course of the past few seasons. And that's no slight when it comes to Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston or even Andy Dalton last year, but it's very clear that Derek Carr just kind of operates on a different level. This guy lives, sleeps. He had no sleeves, actually. He wore no sleeves. Lives, sleeps, and eats, dreams, thinks, speaks football. Football is his life. And it's really cool to sort of see that come out of the introductory press conference, which he was really clear about the type of leader he wanted to be, that he wanted to hold other people accountable, that he wanted to hold himself accountable, that he didn't want to step on the toes of some of the, I'll get to that in a second, Solo, and like wanted to make sure that he remained, respectful of the leaders that were already there, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, all that. And I even asked Derek Carr today, when last night we spoke to you, you said that you were excited about, and you were really highly complimentary of the leadership skills of guys like Cam Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu. What do you have to say now that you've been on the field with him? And he told me that he respects them so much for just being there and showing up. And so let's speak about attendance next. And yes, we will get to Jake Hayner's photo shoot. Don't worry. We'll get to that as well. But I want to talk about attendance because the New Orleans Saints had about 90% of their roster there and ready to go. Derek Carr has to be a big part of that, showing up, being that guy. But who else showed up and who were the folks that were missing and why? We'll get to all that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in all of America, the official sportsbook of the NBA, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA, an official sportsbook of the NFL, and of course, official sportsbook here at the Locked On Podcast Network as well. So you want to go check them out today. It's super easy to navigate, app that you can download, safe, super easy to use, all of that. And you can also, if you're a first-time user of FanDuel, you can get a no-sweat first bet, they call it, of up to $1,000. It's bonus bets that come back to you if your first bet doesn't win. You can get that by heading over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get that no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets. You can use that first bet on the Saints Week 1 line. You can look at same game parlays all around. The NBA is heating up. LeBron James. More importantly, Anthony Davis is no longer in the playoffs. We can all applaud that here in the city of New Orleans, although I do like LeBron James. So the Lakers are out. Nuggets are moving on. What's going to happen with the Heat and the Celtics? You want to get on that. FanDuel's the place to do it. Once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, make every moment more. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We are live here on the Locked On Saints YouTube page, but you might be catching us later as well. In either case, send me your questions in terms of what you want to know about OTAs for tomorrow morning's episode. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to start getting ready for another show for tomorrow. But I want to know what it is that you want to hear about from OTAs, because we're going to focus on Derek Carr, we're going to focus on attendance, and we're going to focus on the receivers and Jake Hayner's photo shoot today. Make sure that you let me know what other stuff you want to hear about for tomorrow's episode. So make sure you get those in, and then I'll make sure that's ready for you bright and early first thing tomorrow morning before we go live again later on in the day. Oh, my fellow bald brother, Wayne, is here. Shout out to you, Wayne. So attendance was kind of a big thing leading into this, and when we were leading into OTAs for the Saints. And as you are an everydayer, you already know by making this show your first listen of the day every day, and I thank you for that, that we were kind of looking going into OTAs going, okay, how many players are going to be present? Well, the fact of the matter is that 79 or 80 of the Saints' 89 players were present. About 90% of their players, which is absolutely outstanding. Let's say 80 players were present. Yeah, it's 89%. So yeah, 90% of these players were all there. And that's huge for New Orleans. Because remember, last year, a ton of players didn't show up for OTAs. And people were talking about, oh, Dennis Allen doesn't have control of his roster, and Dennis Allen doesn't have the respect of his team because they're not showing up for OTAs and all that. Even though like OTAs in 2020 got canceled, OTAs in 2021, people kind of boycotted them because the NFL's, the CBA hadn't gotten updated and all of that. Well, that talk is now behind Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints, because at least 79, if not 80. Some people say they saw Andrus Peat out there. I personally did not, but that doesn't mean that. It could just mean that I missed them. But having 80 of your 89 players, 79 of your 89 players out there for OTAs is absolutely outstanding. And among them being veteran players like Cam Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu. Tono Passanio was out there. Derek Carr was out there, which we 100% expected to be the case. But one of the most important stories that the NFL is going to have this season took its next step today. Foster Moreau was on the field 2 months removed from his Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis, which took place in March. March 22nd is usually the publication date that you'll find when it comes to all the people that were out there and that were, the stories that broke and all these other things. And so now here we are, May 23rd, and he was on the field. And I'm not saying, y'all, that he was just on the field and present and like watching and taking everything in. No. He was on the field running routes, catching passes from Derek Carr, catching passes from Jameis Winston, all of that. I mean, he was out there giving it his all. And when we spoke to him after, and I'll use some of these clips and episodes throughout the week, when we were speaking to him after practice, one of the things that he mentioned was that he was expected to play a full season. Ed Daniels asked him straight up, is there any concern at all physically or muscular, whatever, that you won't be able to make it through an entire season? And he said, not an ounce. It's remarkable. It's remarkable that he has made the recovery that he has. He knows that he is in for a lifelong fight. He understands that. But this is a lifelong fight that, at least right now, is not going to keep him off of the practice field and certainly won't keep him off of the playing field. Incredible stuff. So that was a big piece of presence there to have him in there. Travis, appreciate you coming in all the way from Virginia, homie. Thank you very much for being here. So really, really cool stuff for Foster Moreau. But the attendance that you'll be excited about doesn't stop there. I'm proud to present to you our first installment of Smoke Tuesdays, because Smoke Monday was present. I have photo evidence. I have a picture that he was out there. He was on the field, and he was not running routes, but he was, doing coverage routes and all these other things. He was covering routes, all these other things. So there's so many cool things going on for the Saints. DeMarco Jackson was back out there as well. Smoke Monday was out there. Foster Moreau was out there. You saw every receiver but Michael Thomas was out there, which, no surprise, we did not expect to see Michael Thomas out there at all. And the players that missed are, for the most part, players that you kind of didn't really expect to see anyway. Guys like Michael Thomas, who was coming off of an injury, Alvin Kamara, I didn't really expect to see him. Running back's kind of that tricky position. Demario Davis is a veteran. Ryan Ramczyk is consistently like taking it easy in terms of like monitoring injury and health and stuff like that. Andrus Peat wasn't there. He's coming off of injury. James Hurst wasn't there. That was a little surprising. So really the most surprising one that wasn't there was rookie Nick Saldiveri. But we got an update from that immediately after practice, thanks to head coach Dennis Allen, who explained to us that Nick Saldiveri had a calf injury. Now, I don't know if that calf injury happened during the rookie mini camps after media was present at some point, or if it was something that happened where he was training away from the facility to get ready for OTAs. But when it comes down to him, Cesar Ruiz and Trevor Penning, Cesar Ruiz and Trevor Penning, of course, guys that ended their season with Liz Frank injuries at different times, but still ended their seasons with Liz Frank injuries in 2022. Dennis Allen said immediately that the expectation is that they'll be ready for training camp. So I wouldn't be too worried about that at all. Yeah, take your time throughout voluntary OTAs. Mandatory minicamps, we'll see if anybody shows up. But with that being the case, you expect that when it comes to training camp that you'll see those guys, if not before. So I'm not too worried about the players that weren't around. Demario Davis wasn't there. Not a surprise. Demario Davis, I don't know, has reported for OTAs in quite a while and everything. So that wasn't a super big shock, unless I'm mistaken. But I'm pretty sure. I mean, he was kind of the most vocal guy around the CBA, kind of sitting out of OTAs and all those other things. Taysom Hill was a little bit of a surprise, but he was managing injuries all throughout the season too, and he was managing health all throughout the season last year. He came back from that Liz Frank injury to start the season last year. Maybe he just doesn't want to risk anything for OTAs. Not mad at that. JT Gray also wasn't there, but that's okay. I think that when you look at where the Saints were in terms of their attendance, with 10 players missing, and again, as I mentioned, when it came to Andrus Peat, some folks said that they saw him early, but then saw him leave. I personally did not see him, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't there. So it's either 79 or 80 players that were present. But to have that your first day of OTAs was awesome for New Orleans, and really important because you've got Derek Carr, who's a new quarterback there. You have new weapons all along your offense. You've got an entirely new defensive line, an entirely revamped defensive line. You'll notice none of the names, let me check myself before I wreck myself. Yep, none of the names of players that weren't there were on the defensive line. Cam Jordan had his unit there, 100% in attendance, because that is an entirely new unit that you have to be ready for, and that you have to start to build that chemistry and build your sort of comfort with one another, your familiarity with one another, all of that. So really great stuff for the Saints to have that level of attendance. So cool to see Foster Moreau back out on the field and fully participating. Him and Derek Carr getting to work together again, but this time in New Orleans. Foster Moreau wearing 82, which is the number that he wore right down the street at Jesuit High School when he played there in high school. Just awesome. Just really, really good stuff. So awesome stuff there. Let's get now to some of the guys that made big plays. And they're the guys that you would kind of hope would be the ones making big plays today. And that includes Chris Olave and A.T. Perry, who made two massive catches throughout these OTA practices in team drills as well as in 7-on-7s, things like that. So we'll break it down here as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at the guys that made the biggest plays on the day. So it was cool. Another veteran that was out there, Jamal Williams. We got to see a good bit. Benjamin was dressed but did not participate. So we got to see a good bit of the running backs that are, SaRodorick Thompson, Ellis Merriweather, some of those guys that are kind of further down the depth chart. Great for them to get that opportunity and to see that. But it was the pass catchers that really stood out all throughout OTA day one. You saw a great pass to Juwan Johnson down the seam, but there were two big plays. And I'll start off with the big play which was a big connection from Derek Carr to Chris Olave downfield. And so look, this was one of those plays that you're only ever going to see in OTAs because the play kind of fell apart, wasn't really going to work out. And so Derek Carr would never make this decision in an actual game. But this is the type of thing that you see during OTAs and training camp, is that you just say, well, you know what, I'm just going to throw it up and then give the receiver a chance to go up there and make a contested catch. And remember, one of the things that we were really looking forward to watching when it came to Chris Olave was how much he's improved in terms of his contested catch self and his contested catch game, and has he bulked up and all those other things. Didn't get a chance and didn't get an opportunity to speak directly with Chris Olave, but working on figuring out sort of what his playing weight is coming into OTAs and all those other things. I'll update you with that as soon as I can, of course. But he got downfield And Derek Carr just launched a pass downfield that kind of hung up there. It kind of looked like a punt in a way. And this is no indictment on Derek Carr. Again, under usual circumstances, he wouldn't throw the ball, but because it's OTAs and there's nothing to lose here, give your guy an opportunity to go out there and make a play and help to boost that confidence. Y'all, Chris Olave skied up, got both hands up in between, I believe it was Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu, and came down with one of the most impressive contested catches I've seen in a practice scenario in a long time. In a very, very long time. And when I tell you that he got up, I mean, he got up. He skied up in between these two safeties, got both those hands up there, and then brought the pass down and brought it in. And you heard everyone go nuts. You could hear Cody Burns, the wide receiver coach, yelling, good stuff. He didn't say stuff. Good stuff, Chris Olave. Good stuff, Olave. Yeah, get out there. Come down with it. Bring that down. It was so hype all of a sudden on that practice field. And it was a really cool thing just to see, because that was Chris Olave's big thing over the course of the season was, I want to get better at contested catches. I want to bulk up. I want to be able to make those plays. And they let him do it. As King Jojo says, they let him cook. They let him cook. So I absolutely love seeing that. The other really big catch was by A.T. Perry, the Saints 6th-round draft prospect who they drafted after they traded away Adam Troutman to the Denver Broncos. Had to calibrate that one for a little while. And this one was actually Jake Haener throwing this pass. He put this pass out, and this is one of those. A.T. Perry is working up the left sideline. Isaac Yiadom is in coverage. Here's where photographic memory really helps y'all. And then Jake Haener puts a pass over the back shoulder, right? So this is one of those back shoulder passes. So A.T. Perry has two options. He could turn toward the sideline and try to overturn to make the play, or he can try to turn in and then make the play. But because of where the ball is placed, which is low and inside, which is good placement for a pass like this, high and inside gives the corner an opportunity to be able to get up and make the play. Low and inside means it's either going to be the receiver catching it or it's going to be a drop pass. So good ball placement by Jake Haener. But A.T. Perry whips his body around, and while his body is inbounds, sticks his hands out of bounds and makes the catch and brings it in to stay inbounds. Isaac Yiadom, angry, and actually came back on a crossing route with A.T. Perry in coverage and actually knocked the ball out, was able to come back and redeem himself with the only PBU that we saw for the day. But man, the catch by Chris Olave, the catch by A.T. Perry, just a glimpse. And the catch by A.T. Perry was in team drills. If I recall correctly, my notes are on the other side of the room. If I recall correctly, the Chris Olave catch was in 7-on-7s. But in any case, this is with defenders. This is with a little bit of a pass rush, right? The pass rushers still aren't going to sack the quarterback or anything, but you're still trying to keep the time and get the ball out on time and all these other things. So to see Derek Carr give his guy a shot and trust, and to see the trust already developing between Derek Carr and Chris Olave, really, really good. And then to see Jake Haener get that pass and A.T. Perry just be the big, strong, physical receiver that he has been. This guy fights off blanket coverage like it's a blanket. I mean, like he's just removing a blanket. Like that's all that it is to him. He is the big, strong wide receiver that you thought he would be. And to get to see him make that play before OTA day one wrapped up was awesome. All right. Speaking of, we got folks from Maui coming all the way through. You could be looking at a beach. What you looking at me for, Nicholas? I love that. All right. So to wrap it up, let's have a little bit of fun. Those are our big key observations for the day. Derek Carr, every single bit the leader that he was branded to be. Excellent for this New Orleans Saints team. Attendance was on point for the New Orleans Saints. Impressive turnout for them. 80 of 89 players, 79 of 89 players, however you want to count it. And then, of course, the big catches by Chris Olave and A.T. Perry. Those are the guys you want to see making plays at this stage. They are making plays, and you're seeing the trust get built. Now, let's get to Jake Haener. I've had so many people ask me this question about whether or not I have seen Jake Haener's photo shoot, the Blue Steel photo shoot, I think is what we're calling it now. Warren Sharp putting it out there. I cannot tell you how much I love this, that I absolutely love that Jake Haener did those poses, took those photos, did all that. And the reason why I love it is because I love seeing a quarterback with personality. There's so many of these quarterbacks, young quarterbacks that come into the NFL and go, I got to be a robot. I got to be, have no personality. I got to be vanilla. I got to be all these other things. And Jake Haener bucked that trend, and I absolutely loved it. Because when people spoke to him at the Senior Bowl, I heard T-Bob and Jake talking about this earlier on Off the Bench over on Baton Rouge, ESPN Baton Rouge. And they were saying that like when they spoke to him at the Senior Bowl, that it felt very calculated, robotic, PR trained, all these other things. They didn't use those words. I'm using those words to describe though. But instead, now you see the opposite side of that, like the entire 180 of that, which was him being this goofy, fun dude that took all of these photos and stuff like that. Now, I will tell you, he has gotten not a hard time about it, but he has gotten some stuff about it. Derek Carr gave him a little bit of grief about it. Apparently, Dennis Allen gave him some grief about it. So you could see sort of these guys having fun together, making jokes, all that other stuff. But I think the biggest takeaway here, and as Pammy just said in the chat, Jake is definitely not vanilla. He is not a robot. He has a big-time personality. And really, that is awesome to see. That is really, really cool to see, because I think that Jake Hester had a great point about this on the radio this morning, where he said that you have to be able to be a guy that can blend into every crowd in the locker room when you're a quarterback that can get along with every single one in the locker room. That's what you need to be. And so to be able to be the sort of serious guy that could sit down with, you know, the maybe you've got like some straight laced players or something like that. So you can sit down and talk with them. But then you have sort of that goofy side that allows you to get along with the class clowns, if you want to call them that, in the locker room. But then you have kind of the nerdy sides where you can get along with the guys that like anime and video games and stuff like that. My crowd, like you can get into all that. And so him being able to do all that is really cool. And look, the photos are epic. They're simply epic. So good on you, Jake Haener. Good on you, my dude. All right, make sure you get your questions in. Tell me what you want to know more about when it comes to OTAs. We covered Derek Carr, Foster Moreau, attendance, Smoke Monday. Don't ask me if Smoke Monday was there. I already told you. Smoke Monday was there. And then, of course, we looked at the two big plays. But there's other stuff, too, that we can break down. So I have some stuff prepared for you. But if you got other things you want to know about specifically, please feel free to let me know. I appreciate y'all, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. I can't thank you enough, and I'm so excited that we're here at this point, because it's only up from here. There's so much more on the way with training camp and all this other stuff coming right around the bend. So I appreciate you, as always, for supporting. We're back with you tomorrow. More notes from OTAs in the morning, and then we'll have our live show again tomorrow evening. As always, y'all, thank you so much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you want to keep the conversation going, head over to joinsubtext.com/lockedonsaints. Get in on the subtext over there so you can get some early notice on some stuff. But we'll also, of course, as always, have you covered here every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. As always, you can always find me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.